So, I'm seeing a furious debate going on in my comment sections on videos about Soldier. I'm listening to two camps here. One side says Soldier would be NCR, and the other side says Soldier would be Enclave. And I've heard some very compelling arguments for either side, and I kind of want to go into these because I think they're really weirdly interesting. So for context, if you have no idea who I am and are watching this for some reason, I made a YouTube short about which faction Soldier would choose in New Vegas. And I came to the conclusion that he would side with the NCR because Soldier's very patriotic and the NCR are basically the closest thing to the US government he could pick as like a main faction in New Vegas, because I didn't take into consideration the Enclave because, well, you can't really side with them in Fallout New Vegas, so I didn't think there'd be much of a point. But the comments vehemently disagreed. They were all like, no, Soldier would be Enclave, like, through and through. There's no debating this. Because I think if Soldier could pick what faction he'd be part of, he would pick the Enclave because they're, you know, I think out of any faction, they are the one who's most directly linked to the pre-war government. Soldier loves his Uncle Sam rocket launcher riding, so, you know, that's obviously where he'd go. Now, my problem with this is if you boot up New Vegas and decide, I want to do this playthrough as Soldier, you can't exactly end the game with the Enclave, so I thought, well, this is kind of a moot point. Why would you want to do this? But someone's persuaded me there's a way to make this work, but I'll go into that in a bit. Because for the sake of argument, if you were doing a Soldier playthrough, you would need to go NCR, because if he's that patriotic, there's no way he's going to be able to think, oh, I'm going to go hunt down the Enclave. Because if Soldier, presumably, I think he's like 50 in TF2, around that sort of age. So if he was around that age in Fallout New Vegas, he'd be about maybe 20, maybe in his teens in the events of Fallout 2. So I think he'd have a lot of NCR propaganda in his head. He'd be told from a young age that, oh, the Enclave, they're the evil boys. We don't want to do anything with those guys. They're like the devils of the desert, you know what I mean? So I think if we had Soldier in universe, realistically, he'd see the Enclave as his enemies because the NCR would drill it into his head. I don't think he'd even trust Arcade Gannon after finding out he's part of the Enclave because Soldier just is that blindly loyal to the cause of America. But I think from the perspective of being the courier, essentially, he would see the enemies of America being the Enclave because of what they did in Fallout 2. Quite frankly, from this perspective, I can't see him trusting Veronica either, because I think during the time period in New Vegas, they were in the middle of a war with the Brotherhood, so they wouldn't be too happy about finding Veronica. And she's like, what do you think of the Brotherhood? He'd go, I think they're a menace to society, and I'm going to murder every single one of them. And that will be it. Please rate my Soldier impression from cringe to Sigma. But this does go by the logic that he was born and raised in this sort of area, because I think the only way you could sort of get him into the Enclave would be if he was born into it, because at that point, he wouldn't have the propaganda, like, built into his brain that he would have in the NCR. I'm gonna be real, though. I think this version of Soldier wouldn't survive very long, because I think even if he knew the Enclave's gone, the oil rig's been nuked, Navarro's been taken, I think he'd still be too loud and proud about his Enclave heritage to be all like, you know, because the NCR, they're hunting these guys down by the bucketful, you know, he's not gonna survive very long out there if he's out there waving his flag pridefully. So I don't think this version of Soldier really has any weight in lore, if you know what I mean. I think he doesn't necessarily exist. I think my NCR interpretation is probably the most likely, but it's not my favorite interpretation. I know I keep cock teasing this, but trust me, it'll be worth it. Another suggestion I liked is that he'd be a Brotherhood Knight, because, or at least a rejected Brotherhood Knight, because I feel like it'd be really interesting for him to be part of the Brotherhood of Steel, considering they are US Army deserters, so it would make sense that he's so jingoistic and patriotic if he's part of the Brotherhood. I said rejected there, because I like to think that he wouldn't be accepted into being a knight, but realistically, Soldier's a pretty good fighter, so regardless of how dumb he is and how probably he wouldn't be great at salvaging technology, he'd at least be good at kicking some outsider ass, you know what I mean? It probably wouldn't work either way, because it would have the same problem that the Enclave one would, where he'd be very proud about being Brotherhood, so I don't think he'd get too far. He'd probably get arrested within minutes, but it's a nice thing to think. Now, here's one I really, really like. And the reason I like this one is because it justifies the Fallout lore through TF2 lore, which I think is pretty interesting. So, now, I don't know who's on what side of the fence. I presume I've got some TF2 fans exclusively here, and some Fallout fans exclusively here. But in TF2 lore, Soldier, because TF2 takes place in the 1960s, I think? I'm pretty sure. And during the main game, Soldier is approximately 48. And in his backstory, it said that he applied to be part of the US government, not US government, US Army, so he could go fight the Mustache Men in World War II. See, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that word now. I'm close to being monetized. I don't want to ruin everything. I'm at that part of my career where I've got to gotta start saying unalive and other such things like that. But yeah, he goes to fight the German painting union, and essentially he gets rejected from the US Army because he's basically nuts. And he funds his own way over to Germany so he can fight the war on his own, unofficially part of the US Army. And he ends up fighting the war until like 1949 or something, completely unaware that the war's been won and is completely over. And he was presumably killing innocent Germans or whoever else in the middle of Europe all that time. So someone in my comments came up with the great suggestion of, what if he's like not affiliated with any of these factions? He just finds like research papers about the Enclave or finds Enclave training material, maybe on like a dead one or something, and just takes it upon himself to like move the mantle of the Enclave into the future, believing they are the true US military. Which I love for so many reasons, because it gives him a lot of wiggle room to sort of interpret the Enclave's message however he wants, because if he was actually part of one of these factions, you'd think he'd be affected by their propaganda, like I said earlier, but if he's sort of like found some Enclave sort of I don't know, propaganda materials or messaging or so. Even if he's just found the armor and thought it looked cool, he can sort of make up his own vague version of the Enclave that doesn't really match what they actually were, which would be a great idea because it means he can basically go nuts in his own way and not have to really worry about, like, adhering to strict Enclave ideology. But another reason I really like this idea is because it gives Soldier sort of an ending that would be more accurate to his Enclave opinions. So, what I think this would mean is that you'd essentially have Soldier going like a yes man route at the end, but in his mind, he's taking over the dam for the Enclave. Not for the NCR, not for, you know, the bear and the bull, the bull and the bear, but for whoever he wants to, you know what I mean? Because I can't think Soldier would want to go yes man for any other reason. He's not really the sort of person who'd want to be a leader, but if he thought, okay, this yes man, toaster looking motherfucker, he's gonna help me establish my new Enclave front where we can do epic Enclave things and do America. Yeah. Like, I'm thinking of him just sat there on the dam watching Yes Man throw Oliver over the side while he's sat there in, like, really junky, poorly fitting Enclave armor that I think maybe he'd, like, pull the servers out because he's like, these aren't very American. We fight with muscle and nothing else to assist us. Pain is communism leaving the body. You know, come to think about it, it would actually kind of be like the Enclave city they have in Fallout 76, because I'm pretty sure that's been taken over by some weird AI guy who's like just sat there chilling. I wonder if Soldier will be accidentally creating one of the more peaceful versions of the Mojave, because if you think about it, if he's Enclave role-playing, he's gonna basically just nuke any group he doesn't like. So I don't think there's really going to be anyone there to oppose him if he's going to get all uppity, you know what I mean? Because he'd nuke the Khans, probably. The Fiends wouldn't survive very long. You know, the state of Utopia would be all... They'd be sunk, because he'd immediately nuke them, because they're mutant bastards. We'd lose Jacobstown, but you know what? Some sacrifices have to be made for America. I'm just going to say, doing these videos, I reckon the TF2 characters will be quite fun characters to play in-game. Could you imagine just, like, rolling across the Mojave as Soldier, just going all in on, like, just explosives? The issue with Soldier would be is I can't imagine he'd have the intelligence for a mad bomber run, because that's more of a demo man thing. But you imagine Soldier running around, you know, pointing the red glare at everyone's face, nuking everything, it'd be amazing. But yeah, do you guys think Soldier would turn the Mojave into a mutant-free paradise or another radioactive shithole? Tell me below. Call me names. I love it. Member shout-out time. Thank you to Irrational Sloth, Brandon Ferretti, Gams, Tucket Flame, Commy the Cockroach, Gamra, Makov, Toilet Egg McMuffin, Thy Knight, Stephen the King, Jacqueline, Thrawn One, and Johannes.